I'm going to be showing you how to build a really simple app on the Android platform. It's going to just include a text field at the top with two buttons, and we're simply going to listen for the button click events. So let's get started. First, I'm going to create a new Android application. I'm going to name this Simple App 10. I'm just going to hit next through all of these options, and it's going to automatically build the app for me. So the first thing we want to do is modify this activity main.xml file. Basically what this is, if you're coming from the web world, is your HTML file. It defines the elements on the page, not necessarily even the data describing those elements, just the elements themselves. And it does not include any of the application logic. It's just simply elements. So here we go. I'm going to name this intro text, and I want to adjust this overall layout to be a linear layout. Right now it's a relative layout, and I want something that just stacks all the text and buttons down the page in a vertical fashion. So I'm just going to get rid of all this stuff and change these to fill parent and make this a linear layout. And I'm just going to add an Android orientation, vertical. And then we're just going to add a couple buttons. So right now, what this is doing is presenting the user with a text view, and then it's defining the string of that text in something called intro text. So basically, Android separates the rule of thumb is you want to separate the elements on the page from the data within the elements. So if I want to change something dynamically later, I can do that. So what we're doing is basically setting an ID of a string to intro text, and then we'll call that a bit later. We'll talk about that in a second. But I'm going to add two buttons to the page as well. And I'm going to give the button an ID of, let's see, button start. And I'm going to give the text of a button a string as well. And we can also label this button start. And then I'm going to give it a layout width of fill parent. That will take up the maximum amount of space on the page that it can horizontally. And then I'm going to give the height a wrap content so that it will take up just the amount of space needed for the text on the buttons. So I'm going to create two buttons, a start and a stop button. And let's see, I think that's it for that. So now we want to go see, so Android has already complained it can't find any strings called button stop, button start, or intro text. So we need to define those next, and that is defined in our values under strings.xml. If we open this file up, you see there's our default hello world. I can change this now to, you see I labeled it, I labeled this intro text here. So in my strings file, this hello world is going to change to intro text. And it's just going to say this is a simple application. Let's give it a new line. Let's give it a couple new lines. And we'll give it a label simple app 10. Okay, now we want to add another string. This will be the text on the start button, and we labeled that. You can see here we labeled it button start. Right here we labeled it button start. So we better call that here button start, and we just want the text of our start button to be start. And we're going to assign another string, and we're going to do the same thing with button stop. There we go. We'll save that file, and now if we were to run this right now, you would see all the elements on the page. In fact, we can run it if I just unplug my Android device so we can screen share. So if I unplug my cell phone, we should be able to run this on a on a virtual device. And it's going to take a second for this Android device to boot up. But basically, what's going to happen is these buttons will show up and the text will show up on the page. You won't be able to do anything with it yet. One of these days. Okay, so it took a while for this Android device to boot up, but here we've been able to run it, and we can see this is a simple application, simple app 10, that was defined right here in our strings file, our strings.xml file. This is a simple application, return new line, simple app 10. You can see that's the format for that, and then we added two buttons in our activity, start and stop, and there's our start and stop buttons. So the next thing that we want to do is actually look for the events of the buttons being pressed, and we can do that in our source main activity.java file. This is the activity. This is basically the Java file that will boot up and start to control our application logic. So we can see here We started the file and there's already some pre-populated code in here. A lot of this stuff you don't need to necessarily worry about on every application, but I'm going to add in some convenience functions to this just really quickly, just to look for app-wide state events. And so the first one is going to be the onStart event. And this basically is when your application is started for the first time, this event is called. And now that we've overridden this start event, we want to make sure to call its parent within the function once we're done. But we can actually add our application logic here. And for now, I'll just log this event. And we need a tag for this log in order for it to show up as in our logs as from the application. We need a tag. So I'm going to use this over and over again. So I'm actually going to define a log tag up here at the top. And this is just going to be a private static string. And we're going to name it log tag. And we're going to give it a value of simple app 10. Sure. So we've got a log tag now that we can use to label all our logs. So we're just going to use that log tag, and we're going to say started here. Now there's a couple other convenience functions that I can do. There's one for resume. There's one for pause. That's if, say, the user hit the home button and exited your application. This is a useful function for tidying up real quick before your application goes on hold. There's one for stop, meaning your application has been hard stopped. And there's one for destroy. So a lot of these functions we're not going to end up using, but I just wanted to show you guys that there are some state level events that you can call right away. So we've got our log tag up here. The next thing we want to do is when a user clicks on one of these buttons, we want to respond. We want to be able to do something with that click event. So first of all, we need to find the buttons, and that's pretty easy. We'll label this first one start button, and we're just going to define it as a button. Find view by ID. Since we gave the button an ID here of button start, we should be able to look for that in our main activity.java file. And the way we do that is calling a global R dot ID. So we're going to look for the attribute of ID. And you can see Android comes up with some suggestions. So generally, as a rule, I like to use the Android suggestions. That tells me immediately if there was an error. If I had mislabeled something or misspelled something, I would be able to tell right here because Android would suggest the misspelled element, and I would be able to correct the problem before I ever tried to compile it. So we're just going to add that button start in here, and there's our first button. So you can see Android is complaining because button cannot be resolved to a type. And this is because I haven't included the button library yet. You can see up here I've imported the Android bundle, something called Android OS bundle. but I don't have anything yet that defines button. So what I want to do, there's a really nifty little shortcut here that I can use in Android. If I'm on a Mac right now, I'm on my Mac laptop, and if I hit Command Shift O, watch what happens up here at the top. You'll see that it imported a bunch of things. I no longer have just Android OS bundle. I have util log, I have view menu, I have widget button, and I have something called activity. So Android has gone through and it's realized that I'm logging something and I'm calling something called button, and so it looks in its libraries and it says, okay, I want to import these libraries so that these are clearly defined. So now you can see Android's not complaining, it's just giving me a warning that I haven't used this start button variable yet. That's okay, we're going to do it in a second, but first I want to just define the stop button, and that had an ID of button stop, and we'll just name that button stop. Now what I want to do is set some on-click listeners. And basically, I do that by calling my start button variable, which is actually it's been turned into a class. And then there's a function that I can call inside of this called set on-click listener. It's right here. And basically what it does is you pass a on-click listener in to this function, this method, and it will call on-click on that on-click listener every time the button is clicked. So here's what we're going to do. Currently it just takes a variable called on-click listener, and it's labeled L. But let's label it something else. We're going to create that in a second. We're gonna create this and we're gonna call it a start listener. And we'll just do the same. We haven't defined these yet, but we'll do the same thing for stop. We'll name that stop listener. So now I need to define these. You can see Android's complaining because I haven't defined these listeners yet. So down below here, I'm just going to create a private, and the type is on-click listener. And then the first one that we're going to create is a start listener. And that's just going to equal a new on-click listener. And we're not going to pass anything in here yet. We're just going to define inside of this a method which will be passed through and called. And basically what this is going to be is a public void on-click. This click is going to take a view element. We'll just label that V. And inside of this, we're going to take some action. So I'm just going to log this event. So you can see I'm using my log tag variable here, and my message is just going to be button clicked, and then we'll name this button start. And then I also want to display a message to the user. Obviously the user's not going to see the log files, so I want to notify the user that the button has been clicked. And I can do that with a library called Toast, which manages pop-ups. So Toast, you can see here, it already gives me a suggestion for a method called makeText. And I just want to select that. The context is the context of this activity. And basically it's named main activity. So I just want to pass that in and pass in the context, which is this. And then here I want to add some text. We'll just say button clicked, button start. And then the duration actually can be defined by Toast as well. It gives you some convenience variables here, and one of the globals is length short or length long. It's how long or short the actual message stays up on the user's screen. So let's just do length short here. And then the last thing I want to do is show it to the user. And then I'll add in just one more log line that says ended. So now you can see there's a couple problems with this. One, start listener now is defined, but this on-click listener, again, we're seeing the same error that we saw up with button. On-click listener cannot be resolved to a type, so we're going to have to resolve that. And you'll get the same error message if you mouse over view. It can't be resolved to a type. So both of these are easily fixed if we just hit Command-Shift-0 again. And you'll see Android wants to know which on-click listener to import, and we're passing in a view, so we want to use the view on-click listener library. And you can see Android has done a couple things for me. It's imported toast, it's imported on-click listener, it's imported view. So we're good to go with that function. So you'll see Android's complaining about the stop listener. That's because we haven't defined it yet. So let's just go ahead and copy this method and define stop listener. And you'll see the errors go away. So we just need to change the text here to indicate that this is a stop button click instead of a start button. So with that, we should see no errors in our code. We have a fully functioning view with two buttons and a text view. We've defined our strings, so later if we need to change something, we don't necessarily have to worry about the layout. We can come right in here and change this data if we needed to. And we can save all that out, and we should be able to run this. I've set up a keyboard shortcut called Command-Shift-Run, and that should just run the application in my Android virtual device. And you can see it's compiling and it's launching the app right now. And you should see it launch shortly here. So here's my simple application. If I click the start button, you can see a message appears that says button start. If I click the stop button, button stop. So that's it. That's a really, really simple Android app in about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. And the next tutorial will be how to use the camera, how to implement a very, very simple camera app on Android. So thanks for watching, and until next time, see you later.